Hi, my name is Bruce Krahenhoff. I'm doing a quick presentation to give an overview of what PyTest offers and also some resources that I use to learn more. So PyTest is kind of a magical testing framework. Unit test is the built-in Python unit testing framework. In comparison, PyTest reduces boilerplate, it has nicer syntax, and it provides some additional nice features built in. Also, PyTest can run unit tests, and since TensorFlow tests subclass unit tests, it can also run TensorFlow tests. So this makes it really easy to switch to PyTest, and probably hard to switch in the opposite direction. Fortunately, PyTest seems to be the best Python testing framework. According to Slant, that's what they say, and like anecdotally, most people are using PyTest. So it is probably the framework that you would want to switch to and stick with for a while. So let's go over some basics first of all. So here on the left we have the function, or the functions we want to test, and on the right we have our test functions. So notice the naming here. Here this file name has test underscore at the start. Also notice these method names, they also have test underscore at the start. So this is how PyTest automatically discovers your test. It looks for files with test underscore, and then inside those files it looks for functions that start with test underscore. And there's a few other options as well. Cool. So in contrast, in unit tests, you would have to put this in a class that subtests the unit test class. So there'd be a lot more boilerplate here. And we can just run this by just doing PyTest in the appropriate directory. I'm requesting verbose output here. And as you can see, it gives us a summary. First one passed, the next three failed. And it has some detailed results here. Now notice here we're just using ordinary asserts. We don't need to use that assert equal or assert greater than, or we don't need to do any of that unit test jazz. We can just use plain asserts, and it has some great assert introspection here, which is showing us, you know, our fib of 6 gave us the 9, and that's why our assertion failed. So simple syntax, and it still gives us the introspection we need to debug our test. And here's some more output for the other failures. All right, so let's move on to marks and fixtures. So this is our code before, and now we're importing PyTest, and then we're adding this decorator, pytest.mark.slow. Pytest.mark is built into PyTest. Slow is the marker that we're making up. So now this test is marked as slow by this decorator. Then when we run it, we can say pytest-m for markers, not slow. And it collects 8 items and shows the test results in between. And notice one of them is deselected. That's because we told it, you know, run it, don't run the slow ones, right? And so it skipped this test. And it ran the other ones. Yeah, so that's handy. You can just run the slow tests on your continuous integration server so that you can have quick iteration while you're developing on your local machine. Yeah, various uses for these markers here. And you can make up whatever markers are convenient for you. Now, there's also some special built-in markers like mark parametrized. So here, before, this is one of our tests where we've got a couple of asserts in a single test. So what we're doing is instead here is we've got a single assert here. Ignore that, and we're parametrizing it. So here we've got arg and val, and we put those here as a string, and so it'll take the 3 and the 2, and it'll plug it in for arg and val and run the test. And then it'll take the 4 and 3, plug that in for arg and val, and run another test. and so on. And so in that way, it will actually run 4 tests here based on this single method and these parameters that are passed to it. So over here, you can see here I'm targeting test_fib_ind, this individual test function, and it still runs all 4 tests associated with those parameters here. So this is like way cleaner, way nicer than using a loop. It gives you way better introspection into where and why your test failed. All right. Now, one of the things we might want to do is test that errors are raised. In unit test, you would have to do assert raises. You'd put the function in, and you'd put the arguments separately, and it would call the function inside. Well, here we just use pytest.raises with with statement, and then we can put whatever code we expect will raise the error here. So much nicer syntax, I'd say. And I also have this parametrized to run it 6 times, and the first 5 do raise a value error as expected, and the third one doesn't, and yeah, 3 should actually not raise an error, so that's a mistake in my test here. Yeah, let's move on. Okay, so setup and teardown. In Pytest, there are setup and teardown methods, but it's best just to use fixtures, which a single fixture can do both setup and teardown, and you can target it to the specific tests that you want, and you can target it to the frequency you want. We'll just go over some basics here. Okay, so here's our test method, and we've got an argument. Where does this argument come from? Well, this test isn't parametrized. So what it'll do is it'll say, okay, I identify this as a test method, and we've got this argument, so I'm going to look for a fixture that is named argv6. And up here, I've created this fixture. Using the pytest.fixture decorator, I have registered this method as a fixture in the Pytest framework. And so what Pytest will do is it'll say, okay, I'm going to run this test, and so first I need to run this fixture. It runs it until it gets to the yield, and then it takes this value and it puts it in for argv6, and then it runs the test, and then when the test is run, finishes running, it will run everything after the yield here. So it'll do the cleanup here, right? So we have our setup and our teardown all built into a single fixture here. And we run this specific method, and yeah, so we get an error, and you can see here I print argv6, and indeed it is this value that was yielded. Cool. So setup and teardown is particularly useful if you do the same setup and teardown for multiple tests. So yeah, maybe very often you want to set sys.rv, so yeah, you can automate that for many tests. Oh, interesting. This just staying here. All right, so there's also built-in fixtures, and you can have a look at all the registered fixtures by running pytest-fixture. And so here, this is not all of them. Here's a sample of them. Notice here at the bottom, we've got argv6. This is the fixture we made ourselves. It got registered, and so it's displaying here. Also, there's some built-in fixtures like tempdir to automatically create a temporary directory for your test. And there's monkeypatch. So this has things like set attribute, delete attribute, set item, set environment variables. This can change things, can change how things operate for just the duration of your test. And I found monkeypatch to be quite useful. We're gonna have a look at an example using monkeypatch. So before here, we created our own fixture to do the setup, to set sys.argv, and then to reset it back to the default value so it doesn't, destroy how Pytest is working. Well, we can replace all this with some much simpler code that uses the monkeypatch fixture. So I just go monkeypatch.setAttribute, sys.argv as a string, don't even need to import it, and set it to that. And so this will do exactly the same thing. It's setting this to the value we want, it'll do the assert, and then when this method completes, monkeypatch knows to reset sys.argv to what it was initially. So very handy at reducing boilerplate. Cool. So Pytest, being basically the most popular Python testing framework, is getting some support from the tools. So Pytest kind of has some magic that happens under the hood that just makes stuff work. Often in these cases, your tools don't understand what's going on, so they can't help you as much. But because Pytest is so popular, fortunately, tools are being programmed to understand and be able to help with Pytest. So I'm familiar with PyCharm, so that's why I'm going over PyCharm. I'm sure other tools have varying degrees of support for Pytest. Cool. So this built-in monkeypatch fixture, we just put it as an argument to our test function, and PyCharm recognizes it. It knows the option, so it can help me autocomplete it here. Pytest can also help you easily run and debug your tests. So right here, I can right-click and run or debug an individual test. Very convenient. If I want to run all tests in a directory, I can right-click on the directory and run all the tests. You can also create custom test running configurations. Say if you want to skip your slow tests, you can also do that in PyCharm. After you've run your tests, you might want to rerun one of the tests that failed, so you can debug it. So you can right-click on it here, and you can run or debug. You can also jump and look at whichever particular test you want to look at. So I definitely prefer the PyCharm interface to the terminal interface. Cool, and that is it for this presentation. So the code that I used to make this presentation, I put it in this GitHub repository. And here are some resources that I used for learning PyTest. I found I could learn a little bit from pytest.org, but then it was like, you know, a few rungs of the ladder were missing. So I needed to find other resources to keep learning PyTest. So first I found this book by Brian Oken, who seems to be somewhat of an expert. In fact, all this material is by Brian Oken. So this is a very comprehensive book. I actually just looked at some stuff from the free sample in my Kindle, on my Kindle, and that was enough to get me started. And then I discovered these videos. They're on PyCharm and Pytest. I also learned a lot about Pytest from them, so I learned both about Pytest and how to use it with PyCharm, so these are great. And this video looks really interesting. I haven't actually watched this video yet. And of course, as I had specific things I needed to do, I Googled stuff and learned from whatever resource came up. So I hope this is helpful to get you started. Again, pytest.org. You may be able to learn some basics there, but you'll probably find that you do need other resources to get to a level of proficiency that works well for you. All right, and that is it. Thank you for watching.